So I was a young, brand new administrator too. It was Friday afternoon at the end of my very first week, and so I got this is one of those where as you're sitting on the phone hearing the story, you're thinking, I know you didn't do that. I know you didn't just do that.
The business of healthcare is hard, creating a badlands of terrain that is difficult to navigate. Some think the most brilliant minds in business are on Wall Street. They are wrong. The most brilliant minds are in healthcare. They have to be to thrive and survive. This podcast explores concepts in leadership, management, sales, and negotiation with those brilliant minds. The Healthcare Badlands podcast is generally planned, but unscripted, unedited, and uncut, so you get the honest and unfiltered experience. Your host is Dr. Tom McDougall, a 30-year veteran of healthcare with 23 years of hospital CEO experience. His guests are carefully selected experts from across the industry. They offer insights, expertise, and some great real-life, often hilarious stories. Now, let's jump into the episode.
We are back. This part two of my interview with Mike Neuendorf. If you haven't listened to part one, you want to do that. We just heard Mike tell his story about Halloween. Mike, when I was at one particular facility, they told me I hadn't been there for a Halloween, and they said, "Hey, Halloween's big around here." And I said, "What do you mean it's big around here?" They said we go all out. We have a party, people dress up, our staff dresses up, all that different stuff. We just need to make sure you're okay with it. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I am. I'm assuming we do this professionally because we're here. We got serious, got serious business to do." And they're like, "Oh yeah, 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 everything's fine." And I said, "Give me an example." And they said, "Well, we've had people in the past come, two people from the same department. They come as Tweedledee and Tweedledum, or, two other people in another department. They're thing one and thing two, from Dr. Seuss. Or,
Sure.
we may have a group of employees dress up like The Sound of Music or The Wizard of Oz." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine. All right, that's fine." So anyway, so that morning I get there. Guess how I'm dressed? I'm dressed like the hospital CEO. I'm dressed like I always am dressed. I'm not dressing up because
Boo.
part of me is thinking, did I just get set up? Can you imagine showing up to
Right.
work and you're the only one dressed
The
for
only
Halloween?
one.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I dress like I always do. But I'm roaming around the hospital and doing my rounding that morning, and everything seems to be fine. And I go by the medical records department, which is now most people call health information management, HIM. So I go by that department, and when I walk in, I talk to the staff. A few of them are dressed up, so I chit chat with them. And I walk into the director's office, and I cannot believe what I'm seeing. She is dressed head to toe, full makeup, including props. She's the Grim Reaper. And I'm like, what the
Bad idea.
hell? And literally, her office is right outside the exit to surgery. And I'm sitting there,
Oh,
I felt sick to my stomach. I thought, if a patient's getting rolled out of surgery and they still are a little groggy from the
right.
anesthesia and they see the Grim Reaper, this is going to be
Yeah.
really bad for our patient satisfaction scores. And so, and
Yeah.
so I told her, I said, "You've got to go home." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "You have to go home and change clothes." I said, "You got to go home, change clothes, get your makeup off, and then you can come back to work." I was just stunned. I was like, "Holy cow!" But yeah, I don't know. It's just there's
Crazy.
never a dull moment as a hospital CEO. There's always something going on.
Yeah, I think that there are, we're human. We make mistakes. There are, mistakes made by staff, that you work through. I've certainly made plenty of mistakes. I know you have. We're human too.
Of course.
I've got a great one, maybe for a future podcast. I've got a great one with an email incident where I ended up on the front page of the paper. It's a pretty
Oh,
entertaining
no, no,
story. I
no.
think it's one that
I'm not
you
letting you off
still
the
get
hook.
nervous when I tell it. You still
No, no,
get
no,
nervous when I tell it and say, I don't know how you didn't get fired. But no, I'm saving that one. There
no.
are
We're not
there
saving
are
it, Mike.
other
Tell the
there are
story.
all right, well,
Tell the story.
we may come back to it. There are others, where staff create issues. There are certainly some where patients and visitors in the hospital, do things. I have a laundry list. I was with a colleague the other day who's still in hospital administration, and this was not my story. I cannot take credit, but he had me in tears. He had a patient come into administration. He said he doesn't recall the exact background, but the guy was very agitated. I don't know if it was over the bill received or service aspect. He couldn't recall, but he said the guy sat down and they tried to get through niceties and conversation and try to bring the tone down just a little bit and temperature of the meeting a little bit. And he said he noticed this guy's kind of flipping something in his hand like this, and it is a rather large, like one of the oversized brown prescription medicine bottles. He said no labels on it. It's clear and it's rattling like it's got some corn in it or some coins. It's like a homemade like sports rattler or something. So he's sitting there talking and the guy gets to telling his story and he said mid story the gentleman unscrews the lid off and he empties the contents of the medicine bottle right here on top of the CEO's desk. Well, the story starts getting a little clearer along the way, and he realizes this is a collection of kidney stones. And he said, I'm not talking need a magnifying glass kidney stones. He said these are legit sand spurs, in the dunes on the beach that get stuck in your foot, like small asteroids. He said, I'm so affixed with this mound of kidney stones now laying right on the top of my nice desk leather writing pad that I can't even hear what he's saying anymore. So the gentleman across the desk continues on with his story, and my buddy says, he finishes kind of talking, and he said, all I can say is, he said to take a pen and kind of scoot some to the side. He said, now, that one right there came out of your penis. I said, yes, sir, it did. He said, well, you're more of a man than I am. What was it you needed? So sometimes you don't know what's going to walk in the office, right?
It's the kidney stone. The only time I've ever had kidney stones was at your house in Mississippi. And I started
Oh,
feeling really uncomfortable on that Friday when we were driving to your place in Mississippi. And by Saturday morning, I'm miserable. I can't remember which one of your boys was playing basketball, but all I remember is that I don't remember anything other than there was a basketball game and I was dying. So I suffered through the
yeah.
entire weekend, and on Monday morning, I call a doctor friend of mine who happens to be a urologist and said, I'm coming to your office. I don't have an appointment. I don't care. And so I walk in. Well, he starts laughing at me as soon as I walk in because I can't stand up straight. And
Yeah.
he said I didn't cancel appointments. I'm just gonna have to work you in. I said I don't care. I mean, I literally didn't care. And so he does the scans and the tests and all these different things. And he comes in and I'm just dying. And he said, Tom, he said, hey, I can't find any kidney stones. And I said the only thing I knew to say, I looked at him and I said, look again.
There's something in there.
And he just dies laughing. I mean, literally fell into a tear laughing at me. I was like, there's
Yeah.
something bad wrong. It's like, no, 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 you passed it already. I'm just telling you, you're still uncomfortable. You'll be okay. But yeah,
Yeah.
I had a physician that it was unfortunate, but he ends up in rehab. So I start getting reports that people can smell alcohol on him. And unfortunately, the reports are, I smelled alcohol on Dr. So and so. And I'd say, okay, well, where is he? And they go, oh, no, that was 2 days ago. I'm like, well, that's not helpful.
Right. Right.
That's not helpful. And so finally, I get a report that they smell alcohol on him. And I said, when? They said, right now. I said, okay, where is he? And so they go get him, bring him to my office, and he seems perfectly fine, but I can smell what they're talking about. But he seems normal. Um, but sadly, he ends up, he ends up in rehab. And so, I like this guy. I mean, he screwed up, so be it. He screws up. He's in inpatient rehab. They move him to outpatient rehab, and they're updating me. In the state where I was, they could, they would inform you because the hospital CEO would get informed what was going on, and your commitment was to allow them to complete the rehab and maintain their medical staff privileges. It was attempted to rehabilitate them back to, caring for patients. And so they called me and tell me he's an outpatient. I said, well, is it okay if I call him? And they said, well, of course, you're welcome to call him. And I said, great, I'll give him a call tomorrow. So I called him the next day and I said, how are you doing? And he said, I feel much better. And I said, well, good. I'm glad. He said, I think I got it licked, but it's a process. And I said, well, I'm so glad that you're doing better. I'm so glad that, you're heading in the right direction. And he said, yeah, but he said, I tell you what, though, he said, I'm also kind of pissed. And I said, okay, what are you upset about? He said, well, they're making me take this damn anger management class. And I start laughing. He said, what are you laughing about? I said, I think you need to take it twice. And to this day, he still teases me about that. He'll call me and I'll answer the phone. And he said, I didn't take it twice. I'm like, well, okay.
Help you learn.
But it's
Yeah, I
just,
think we've all been through that one.
oh my gosh, just it's horrible. It's horrible. And, I'm not saying there's an excuse for substance abuse by any means. It's an extremely stressful environment. But yeah, it's more prevalent than it should be, for sure. This episode is sponsored by CO Management Solutions, a revenue cycle company you may not have heard of, but you need to hear this. There is little healthcare organizations can do about inflation-related expenses, but you can make sure you're collecting 100% of your revenue you have earned. CO uses AI and the latest technology paired with an efficient team to aggressively collect your hard-earned revenue at an attractive commission. Start today with a free analysis of what you are leaving uncollected and recover that revenue quick with CO. For more information, visit coms.com. That is SCIOMS.com.
You told a story earlier, one that just came to mind. You were telling one about your first few weeks at a hospital, and I know every administrator has one of these, and in the first week type stories, right? So I was a young, brand new administrator too. It was Friday afternoon at the end of my very first week, and so this is one of those where as you're sitting on the phone hearing the story, you're thinking, I know you didn't do that. I know you didn't just do that. And then all the follow-on thoughts and the process you have to work through. So it was 4:30 on Friday. I mean, it was nearing the end of the day, end of the first week. Felt like this is a lot of fun. Licked the first week, ready to drive on and do some great things. And so my phone rings. And the lab director was on the other line, and she said, "Do you have just a minute?" Yes, I have just a minute. Yeah, sure. What is it? Well, we've sort of done something that you're not going to be happy with, and we've got to figure it out. Okay, well, that's quite the lead in. Thank you. So
Remember, first week.
Yeah. So long story short, a young lady and her boyfriend had been to a local fast food establishment and left said fast food establishment. We're blinding all the places and names in our stories, trying
Of
to
course.
anyway.
Yes.
Left this local fast food establishment and decided that the Diet Coke was laced with something. And so this young lady and her boyfriend, and so upon calling her mom, who happened to be one of our laboratory technicians, the mom said, well, just bring that Diet Coke right up here to the hospital lab and we'll get that tested.
Oh no.
So she does just that. She ends up running the Diet Coke in our laboratory system. Now, I'm not a clinician in any way, shape, or form, nor am I a chemist. I don't understand all the testing that goes on back there, but what I do know is that we are not authorized to be testing
Exactly.
a retail product for narcotics or whatever it was they were in the process of testing it for. So, long story short, she runs the test based on whatever output from the chemistry analyzer. She decides that the Diet Coke is in fact laced and has called the local police department. The local police department has since gone to said fast food establishment and shut it down until further notice while they get it tested. So this is the point that the lab director calls me to fill me in.
Has,
Now
has
by
anybody
the
brought
end,
up has anybody brought up chain of custody at this moment?
not that I recall. So she is so now it's approaching 5. I have that feeling I let in with, like, surely we didn't test this. Each time I thought that, well, yes, we did. Well, yes, we did call the police. Well, yes, they do have it shut down. So I said, all right, well, just give me a minute. So my new wheels are starting to turn, like, who the hell do I call? What do I do with this? Should I call Tom? So so
I'm glad
it
you didn't
probably
call
crossed.
me.
It probably crossed. Yeah. I would. You know what would have happened? You would have laughed just like this.
Yeah.
But so I ended up thinking, well, maybe I should call legal. We got a lot of legal things going on here. I'll start there.
Bad
And
idea.
Tom, well, yeah. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you have in-house counsel that are really helpful, though. And this particular
Yeah.
one, who we'll just call her JP, was one of
I
those
know, I know who we're
that,
referring to.
and she's still in the world. She's still in healthcare, still doing fantastic things. She was one that was absolutely amazing. She would look for solutions, not barriers. She would help you. This particular afternoon, at now 5:05 on Friday, when I got to this point in the story, JP is hysterical. She's laughing so hard on the other end of the phone, it's starting to agitate me. I'm like, it's 5:05 on a Friday. I'm a newbie. I don't know what the hell to do. It's lucky I even determined legal was a good person to call, and I've got you, and this is the response I get. And so her laughter started toning back down. She's like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But it is funny, and she started going again. So anyway, she helped me walk through the scenario. We were able to get the local PD on the phone and talk to them about our abilities and what we were qualified to test and not test. And anyway, we learned a lot and drove on from there. Had some education with the laboratory staff as to what we were to do and not to do. So people will make mistakes, and I think we learn from all those. We learn, one, how to remain calm through these
Oh
fires,
yeah.
because they're going to land in your lap. They're going to land in your lap at 5 o'clock on a Friday. They're going to disrupt your day, but the important thing is, how do I logically work through the facts and make the most the best approach to solving this and moving on, learning from it, etc.
Yeah. Well, and so many times these stories are much funnier in hindsight than they were at the moment. We're certainly not laughing in
Oh,
our offices when these crazy things are happening. But it's that ability to control your facial expressions that we have to
yeah.
develop, and control your mouth. I mean, there's a lot of times you just don't say what you're thinking because I have said forever that if mind reading or a bubble, every time you thought something, there's a bubble that pops above your head, and it repeats exactly what you're thinking. I have said before that I would not have a job, nor friends, nor family members that cared anything about me if people could read my mind on sometimes the things you think, because yeah, somebody brings something to you and you're like, what the hell? Really? But you don't react that way. You're just like, that's let me ask you some follow-up questions. But yeah,
Yeah.
I had a moment. I was interviewing a CFO candidate, and he was supposed to be there. I can't remember what time it was, 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was. And I got delayed trying to get back to my office in the hospital. And so I'm about 10 minutes late. I can't remember who stopped me in the hall. Somebody stopped me. But I walk in and this guy is sitting across the desk from my assistant, which I thought she was great. She was fantastic. I could read her mind and she could read mine. So it was perfect. But he is sitting across the desk and they are both totally silent. And he is holding a novel in his lap and he's reading. Okay, so I'm like, okay, I mean, so be it. I mean, I'm 10 minutes late. He's killing time. I would rather him be sitting there talking to my assistant because she's part of the interview process. I want to know how he treated her and what they talked about and what she thinks. But he's reading, and I walked in and I said, I am so sorry. I'm a few minutes late. I apologize. I'm ready for you if you want to come on into my office. And he never gets up. He looks at me and says, sure, just a moment. And he looks down and finishes to a stopping point in his novel. He finishes reading the page. And I am in my office going, what the heck's happening? And I can see my assistant out there and she is literally bouncing because she is trying not to laugh out loud. Um, I later find that's exactly what
Bubble.
she was experiencing. Yes. And so he comes in and so he's in my office and I'm literally, and like I do, I can decide whether or not I'm going to hire somebody in 10 minutes. That's about all it
Hmm.
takes. Now I'm going to spend the next couple of hours validating that my initial response was correct. But if I land in the first 10 minutes on I'm not hiring this person, we're good. We're done. And so um, and so I end up cutting the interview short, which seems to be a pattern now that I think about it. But I cut the interview short and didn't have everybody else spend time with this guy. So fast forward about 18 months, we're at a corporate office meeting, and uh, so it's a social moment during the corporate office meeting. And so I did what I always did because I was the person they couldn't ever seem to get rid of because of my tenure. And so I always look around the room and see, okay, who do I not recognize in the room? And when usually, I know 90% of the people in there, but there's some I don't. And so I make it a point to go introduce myself. Well, there's one person in the room and I'm like, I don't think I know him. And so I walk over and introduce myself. We're chatting for a few minutes, and he looks at me and he says, well, we met. And I said, I said, I thought you might look a little bit familiar, but I cannot place you. And he says, he doesn't crack a smile. He doesn't hesitate. He says, you didn't hire me for that CFO position. And I said, the only thing I knew to say, I said, well, it's so good to see you again. And what I'm thinking in the bubble above my head is, who the hell hired this guy? Well, I find out it's my
Yeah.
boss. He hired him. And now I don't know what to do. And so I don't do anything. I get away from the conversation. I'm embarrassed because, maybe I blew it. I mean, I didn't know what was going on. Maybe my interview just went poorly. He's going to be great, double thumbs up. I'm excited, and I hope this guy doesn't hate me, this whole routine. So fast forward again, like 9 or 10 months later, and I'm talking to my boss, and he proceeds to update me on things going on in our division. And one of the things is that guy is no longer with us. And instead of just keeping my damn mouth shut, I say, yeah, I'm not terribly surprised. and he double takes with me. It's the same person we were talking about before, so all business. But he double takes with me and he says, "What are you talking about?" And I dance around it. He says, "Stop dancing. Tell me what's going on." And I tell him the story about when I interviewed this guy, and he gets all uptight and says, "Well, how did I miss this? How did I not call you? How did I not get a reference on this guy? How did I not?" And I stopped him. I said, "I'm not on his resume. I didn't hire him." I said, "We never worked
Yeah.
together. So it's not on his resume." And he goes, "Oh." He said, "Well, that makes more sense." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But I'm not surprised he didn't make it." Just, I don't know. Just, it's funny how, in the moment it wasn't funny at all, but now it's like,
Yeah.
comical. All right. And I'm not letting
I
you
thought
off the
you're, I
hook.
thought,
I'm
yeah,
not
you are.
letting you off the hook. You're
I
gonna
thought
you're
you're,
gonna tell this email story. Come on.
I thought your cartoon bubble was going to say, "Did you finish the book?" I mean, I thought, I think there may be a great an AI app product where, conversationally it can hear the conversation and put thoughts in and put some cartoon bubbles. I mean, there's got to be something
No,
good out there.
no, because I would be a lonely, lonely person. This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
I think we, it's funny in life. I think we go through stages, or at least I did, where I probably expressed my opinion openly more than I should have earlier in life. Um, have gotten to a phase where I where I learned and matured and held some more things to myself. And then as we get older, as we look at our parents and certainly grandparents, they're like, "I don't give a shit. I'm going to say it."
Oh,
So
yeah.
I was on a flight last week and I'm sitting there and I'm in middle seat, row 30, nice people on both sides of me. We're having some conversation. So this line of people's trying to put their bags in the overhead, it always backs up. And this guy's right here in the aisle and he's putting his roller suitcase and then his backpack or some secondary bag up there. And this older lady's in the aisle and she taps him on the shoulder and she says, excuse me. Um, I'm not suggesting this time, but like in the future, the overhead's meant for one roller bag and your smaller bags are to go under the seat. And the girl next to me looks at me. She's like, she a freaking flight attendant? It's like, I don't think so. I think she's just old and doesn't give a shit.
Well, it's one of the great
So
things
good.
about getting older is you can say whatever you want to say. And
Oh,
we're
yeah.
not there yet, but at some point we'll get there where you can say whatever you want to say and people just go, "Oh, he's old. Just ignore him." I'm kind of looking forward to that. I
Yeah.
think that's going to be the only byproduct of getting old is that you can actually say what
Yeah.
you want to say and people give you a pass for it. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's what things people will
One of the
say. It's
other,
nuts.
yeah, one of the other topics we've got to have on a future podcast is all things emergency department.
Oh,
That
yeah.
hands down is, the wild, wild west, and have had great examples and great stories of improvements and things you can do to differentiate your ER from, a senior track. You name it, but throughput initiatives. There's a lot of opportunity there we can talk about and throw some good ideas out to people still in that world. But there's also a lot of disruption that goes on. And just to tee up a few, I mean, we had a contract lab worker who was quasi dating a gentleman who was on a high speed across multiple state chase with state troopers and she ends up letting it in our back door. He ends up in the ceiling in a room armed. So that's an
Oh,
interesting
wow.
one. We had a shoe model. We'll call her that, a shoe model that ended up in the ceiling in the emergency department and fell through on top of an elderly gentleman a few rooms over. So the ER's a smorgasbord of fun though. So we'll save some of those stories.
Yeah. Well, have you seen the show called The Pit with Noah Wiley?
I
Have you
don't think
seen
so.
this? You need to
No,
watch that
I've
show.
heard of it. I haven't seen it.
And they are not a
Oh,
sponsor of this podcast, but you need to watch that show. It is the most realistic ER based show that I've ever seen. Even Wendy,
all right.
my wife, the nurse. she's like, holy cow, they've done their homework. Very realistic as to just the craziness that occurs. And yeah, I mean, I always love the ER because the ER hospitals are kind of crazy environments and unpredictable environments on their own. The ER is 10 times what goes on in the hospital, if not more than 10 times. So there's always something
Yeah.
going on in the ER. Yeah.
Tom, I'm looking
So
at you
you're
on camera, realizing, no, I'm realizing how white your beard is, as mine is, and
extreme.
we could say it's from the 20 plus years of hospital administration. I think it's probably just life and age for both of us, and we're not that distant in age. Lots of changes go on and dumb things we did that catch up to us, and I need to have surgery for that. I need to start drinking Celtic salt, whatever it may be. So, and one good one, don't take 6 Imodium ADs to stop diarrhea just because you think you need to go snow skiing. That that's a health improvement story in and of itself. So I'll dangle that one out there. Back to you're not letting me off the hook. We've only got like 4 minutes, so I don't have ample time to tell the story like it needs to be told. So future podcast, dial in on the how did Mike end up on the front page of the paper.
I'm so disappointed because it's a
I'm
fantastic
sorry.
story.
It it's coming.
Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been fun. Yeah, for those of you that know me and Mike, this is just normal. This is just like us having a normal conversation most days. Seems like we are kicking around the idea of doing a podcast, just the two of us, that has really nothing to do with anything professional. But I do hope that everybody has enjoyed podcast today and just gotten a little bit of a sense of, it's a nutty environment. It's a high speed, high action, complicated environment. And I've said for years that, everybody should cut the hospital CEO and the COO and the CNO, cut them a little slack, because the number of things that just kind of hit them out of the blue is unbelievable. And I still say that now that I'm not one of those folks. It is just it's an extremely challenging environment, an extremely challenging job. It's an honor for those people to have the opportunity to serve. I certainly considered it an honor, but I hope the last 2 episodes have just given you a little bit of a feel for, insight into what it is like to be a hospital CEO and some of the challenges that you deal with.
Yep. It's been great to be here. Shout out to Gallagher Insurance Point again. My
Yep.
fund I'm in now. If you're looking for big time savings, contractual audits, ways we can help you in insurance and benefits, or go to dinner and have some fun, give me a shout.
I am charging you for that sponsorship. All right. Thanks,
That's
Mike.
fine. I'll take you to lunch. See y'all.
Deal.
Thank you for listening to the Healthcare Badlands podcast. As always, please like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you have suggestions for topics or guests, please email those to podcast@badlands.pro. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. Some information shared may include fictitious names. The opinions expressed are solely those of the host and/or guests and are their own and not reflective of the opinions of others or our sponsors. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of the Healthcare Badlands podcast. Until then,